France, August 1944. The bell tower stood like a broken tooth against the dawn sky. Half its roof was gone, scattered across the rubble-strewn courtyard below. The bells themselves had fallen weeks ago, their bronze bodies now melted slag somewhere in the chaos of the Allied advance. But the stone walls remained. Thick, medieval, bulletproof. Inside, pressed against those ancient stones, a young American sergeant lay motionless. 20 years old, Appalachian-born, mountain-raised. His name was Elias Brennan, though the men in his unit called him Ghost for the way he moved through the forest, back home silent as morning mist. He'd been in this position for 16 hours, not moving, barely breathing. His body screamed at him, legs cramped, shoulders on fire, eyes burning from constant focus through the rifle scope. None of it mattered. 800 yards away, across a patchwork of French farmland torn by artillery and tank treads, a German staff car sat parked at a crossroads. Officers gathered around a map spread across the hood. Their movements were crisp, military precise. One of them wore the distinctive collar insignia of a Wehrmacht general. General Major Friedrich Kruger, the ghost of the Eastern Front. 47 confirmed kills as a sniper before they'd promoted him to lead men instead of hunt them. For 3 days he'd held this defensive line together through pure tactical genius, killing 40 American boys in the process. Now Elias Brennan, called Ghost by men who didn't know he'd earned that name long before this war, had his crosshairs on the German's head. The rifle in his hands wasn't army issue. It was a Winchester Model 70, a civilian hunting rifle. The kind you'd use to shoot deer in the Tennessee mountains, not generals in France. The sniper instructors at Camp Perry had laughed when he'd shown up with it 2 years ago. They'd called it a toy, said it belonged in a barn, not a war. In 60 seconds they'd learn otherwise. Elias exhaled slowly. His finger tightened on the trigger. The trigger his father had tuned to break at exactly 2 pounds 4 ounces. The trigger his mother had paid for before she died, bringing him into this world. The shot that followed would save 500 American lives. Would change military sniper doctrine forever. Would prove that sometimes the weapon they mock is the weapon that wins. But first we need to understand how a Tennessee mountain boy ended up in a French bell tower with his father's rifle preparing to kill a man 800 yards away. The story begins in 1936 in the Blue Ridge Mountains, where a 12-year-old boy was learning that a rifle is more than wood and steel. The Blue Ridge Mountains in summer, green so deep it's almost black in the hollows. The kind of green that swallows sound, that makes the world feel smaller and older and more alive. In a valley between 2 ridges where a creek ran clear enough to drink from a small town clung to the mountainside. Population 417, no stoplights, 1 general store, 1 church, 1 school, and 1 gunsmith shop. Callum Brennan's shop sat at the edge of town, a wooden building with a sign so faded you could barely read the letters. But you didn't need to read the sign. Everyone within 3 counties knew Callum Brennan. Best gunsmith in Tennessee, some said. Best in the South, others claimed. Men came from Virginia and Kentucky and North Carolina to have Callum work on their rifles. Inside the shop, the air smelled of gun oil and sawdust and coffee that had been on the stove too long. Rifles lined the walls, some waiting for repair, some waiting for pickup, some that Callum had built from scratch works of art in walnut and blued steel. At the workbench, under a window that let in the mountain light, a man and a boy worked in the kind of silence that only exists between people who understand each other completely. Callum Brennan was 48 years old, hands scarred from 40 years of working with tools and metal, back bent from decades hunched over workbenches. But his eyes were sharp and his hands were steady, and when he held a rifle, you could see why men travelled 100 miles to watch him work. The boy was 12. Elias, dark hair like his father, blue eyes like his mother, though he'd never known her. She'd died the day he was born, and the only thing she'd left behind was a son and a dream that someday he'd have the finest rifle money could buy. Callum was teaching the boy to read wind, not with words. Callum Brennan wasn't a man who wasted words. He taught with his hands, with demonstrations, with the patience of a man who understood that real knowledge takes time. He pointed through the window. Outside, the grass on the hillside moved in waves, pushed by wind that came down from the high peaks, funneled through the valleys, spinning and swirling in patterns that most men would never notice. "Watch the grass, boy." Elias watched. He'd learned young that when his father spoke, you listened. Not because Callum raised his voice, he never raised his voice, but because every word mattered. Every word was a lesson you'd need someday. See how it bends, near the ground first, then the tops catch up. Elias nodded. That's a rolling wind. Comes in waves. You shoot in the trough between waves, or you miss. Callum picked up a rifle from the bench, a Winchester 71 he was building for a customer in Knoxville. He worked the action smooth as silk and held it out to Elias. Feel the weight. Elias took the rifle. It was heavy for a 12-year-old, but he'd been handling rifles since he could walk. His father didn't believe in waiting until boys were older. The mountains didn't wait. Life didn't wait. A rifle is a promise, Callum said. A promise between you and the target. You promise to know your weapon, to practice until it's part of you, to respect what it can do. The target promises to be there when the bullet arrives. You keep your promise, the mountain keeps its promise. That's the deal. Elias ran his hand along the stock. Beautiful wood. Grain like water flowing. Bluing so deep it looked black in the shadows, blue in the light. Someday, Callum said, you'll have a rifle like this, your own, tuned for you, and you'll shoot 1,000 rounds through it, then 10,000, and somewhere in those 10,000 rounds something will change. You won't be a boy with a rifle anymore. You'll be something else, something complete. He took the Winchester back, set it carefully on the bench. But first you learn. You watch the grass. You feel the wind. You understand that shooting isn't about pulling a trigger. It's about reading the world. They worked through the afternoon. Callum showed Elias how to disassemble a Springfield 1903 the main rifle hunters used in these mountains, showed him how the bolt worked, how the firing pins struck the primer, how the bullet travelled down the barrel and the rifling spun it for stability, showed him how to clean metal without scratching it, how to oil wood without soaking it, how to test a trigger pull with a scale made from fishing weights. Elias absorbed it all. He had his father's hands, his father's patience, his father's understanding that good work takes time. Outside, the sun moved across the sky. The shadows lengthened. The grass kept bending in the wind, and Elias kept watching, learning to read its patterns like his father read the grain in wood. He didn't know it then, but he was learning the skills that would save his life in a French bell tower 8 years later. Learning to read wind at 800 yards. Learning that patience matters more than speed. Learning that a rifle is a promise, and promises his father would tell him again and again are meant to be kept. 2 years passed. Elias grew, taller, stronger, more skilled with every rifle that passed through his father's shop. By 14, he could disassemble and reassemble a Winchester Model 70 in under 4 minutes blindfolded. By 15, he was out shooting grown men at the county shooting competitions. The men didn't like losing to a boy, but they respected skill, and Elias Brennan had skill that came from 10,000 hours at his father's workbench, learning that rifles were more than weapons. They were instruments. And like any instrument, they required mastery. On a Saturday in April 1940, Elias turned 16. His father closed the shop early, something he never did. They drove up the mountain in Callum's truck, an old Ford that burned oil and complained on the steep grades but kept running through sheer stubbornness. They parked at a clearing Elias knew well. They'd shot here hundreds of times. A natural rifle range with distance markers Callum had set at 100 yards, 200, 300, all the way out to 500. Beyond that, the mountain dropped away into a valley so deep, the creek at the bottom looked like a silver thread. Callum pulled a long case from the truck bed, wrapped in canvas, tied with rope that had been tied and retied so many times the knots were smooth as stones. He handed it to Elias without a word. Elias untied the knots, pulled back the canvas. Inside, nestled in fleece, was a Winchester Model 70. Not just any Winchester. This one had been built by his father's hands. Callum had spent 6 months on it, working late into the night after the regular work was done, hand-selecting the walnut for the stock, truing the action until it was smoother than any factory rifle had a right to be, tuning the trigger until it broke like glass, clean and crisp, with no creep, no hesitation. The bluing was perfect, deep, even. The kind of finish that takes patience and skill and an understanding of metal that most gunsmiths never develop. Elias lifted it from the case. It fit his shoulder like it had been made for him, which of course it had been. "Your mother," Callum said, and then stopped. He didn't talk about Nora much. The grief was old now, 16 years old, but grief doesn't disappear. It just changes shape. He started again. "Your mother, Nora, before she died, she saved money. Every week a little bit. We didn't have much. Depression was hard on everyone, but she saved. She told me, 'Callum, when our boy is old enough, he gets the finest rifle you can build.' She knew she wouldn't be here to see it, but she wanted to give you something anyway." Elias felt something tight in his chest. He'd never known his mother. She was stories, photographs, a name on a gravestone on the hill behind the church. But here in this rifle she was real. She'd touched this money, made this choice, given this gift. 10,000 rounds. Callum said. "That's when you and the rifle become one. I've put about 100 through it, sighting it and making sure everything's true. The other 9,900 are yours to fire. You take care of this rifle and it'll take care of you. That's the promise." Elias looked at his father. Callum's eyes were wet, but his voice was steady. "I'll never let it go, Pa. I'll make you both proud." Callum nodded, put his hand on his son's shoulder. "I know you will, boy. Now let's see if you can hit that 500-yard marker." Elias could, and did. The rifle shot true, perfectly balanced. The trigger broke exactly when he wanted it to. The recoil was manageable. The scope was crystal clear. They shot until the sun went down and the shadows filled the valley below. Elias put 50 rounds through the Winchester that day. Each one felt right. Each one felt like the rifle was talking to him, telling him where the bullet would go before he pulled the trigger. On the drive home, bouncing down the mountain in the old Ford, Callum spoke one more time. "The world's getting darker, Elias. There's talk of war in Europe. Might come here eventually. If it does, if you have to go, you take that rifle. Don't let some army sergeant tell you what weapon to carry. You carry your promise. You carry your mother's gift. You carry what you know." Understood. Elias understood. 19 months later, Japanese planes attacked Pearl Harbor. Elias Brennan, 17 years old, walked into the recruitment office in Knoxville with his Winchester Model 70 wrapped in canvas, ready to keep his promise. The war came like a thunderstorm over the mountains. Fast, sudden, changing everything. December 7th, 1941, a Sunday. Elias was in the shop with his father when the radio crackled to life with news from Hawaii. Pearl Harbor, ships burning, men dying, war. Callum turned off the radio. They sat in silence for a long time. Outside, the mountains looked the same as they always had. Green, eternal, indifferent to the wars of men. But Elias knew things had changed. He was 17, nearly 18, the right age for war, the wrong age for wisdom. "You'll go," Callum said. Not a question, a statement. "Yes, sir." Callum nodded. He'd expected this. He'd fought in the last war in France in trenches that turned men into ghosts. He knew what his son was walking into. "Take the Winchester. I mean it. Don't let them take it from you." "I won't." On a cold morning in January 1942, Elias walked out of the recruitment office with papers that said he belonged to the United States Army now. He'd told them he was 18. They hadn't asked for proof. They needed bodies more than they needed birth certificates. In June, the Army sent him to Camp Perry, Ohio, sniper training. They'd tested his shooting skills at basic training and flagged him for advanced marksmanship. Elias Brennan could put 5 rounds through a silver dollar at 300 yards. The Army wanted men who could do that. He arrived at Camp Perry on a Tuesday, carrying his duffel bag in one hand and the canvas-wrapped Winchester in the other. The training facility sprawled across hundreds of acres of flat Ohio farmland. Nothing like the mountains, no place to hide, nowhere for sound to die. Everything exposed under a sky that went on forever. The barracks were long wooden buildings that smelled like pine tar and boot polish and the sweat of nervous men. Elias found his bunk, stowed his gear and unwrapped the Winchester. The other trainees noticed. Hard not to notice a civilian rifle in a room full of Army-issue weapons. A corporal from Michigan leaned over. "What's that? My rifle. Looks like a hunting rifle." "It is." The corporal laughed. Not mean, just surprised. "Brother, they're going to take that away from you first thing. This is the Army. We use what they give us." Elias didn't respond. He cleaned the Winchester, oiled it, wrapped it back in the canvas, and went to dinner. The next morning, they assembled on the range. 60 men, all of them selected for advanced marksmanship, all of them thinking they were the best shots in their units. Sergeant Klaus Henriksen walked the line. Norwegian descent, hard face, harder eyes, voice like gravel in a can. He'd been training Army snipers since before most of these boys were born, and he'd seen every type. The cocky ones who thought they were already experts, the scared ones who'd never killed anything bigger than a rabbit, the quiet ones who might actually make it. He stopped in front of Elias, looked at the canvas-wrapped rifle leaning against the bunk. "What's that, Private?" "My rifle, Sergeant." "Unwrap it." Elias unwrapped it. The Winchester gleamed in the morning light. Beautiful, professional, clearly expensive. Henriksen picked it up, worked the action, felt the trigger. His face showed nothing, but Elias saw his eyes. The sergeant knew quality when he held it. Then Henriksen held the rifle up, high, so all 60 men could see. "Gentlemen," he said, his voice carrying across the range, This is what happens when Daddy spoils his little boy. This is a toy. A deer rifle. Pretty enough for a Sunday hunt. Useless for war. Some of the men laughed. Not everyone. But enough. Henriksen looked at Elias. You think you're special private think because you've got a fancy civilian rifle you're better than these men with their standard-issue Springfields? No, Sergeant. Real snipers use the Springfield 1903A4, military specification, tested in combat, proven, not some hunting toy your daddy gave you for your birthday. My mother gave it to me, Sergeant, before she died. The laughter stopped. Henriksen's face didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. I'm sorry for your loss, Private, but this is war. We don't bring hunting rifles to war. We don't bring sentiment. We bring what works, what's proven, what won't get you killed. He handed the Winchester back to Elias. Put it away. You'll be issued a Springfield like everyone else. If you want to keep that pretty toy packet with your personal gear, maybe you can shoot deer with it when you get home. If you get home. Elias took the Winchester. Something burned in his chest. Not anger, shame, public shame. 60 men had just watched him get humiliated. Watched his mother's gift get called a toy. But he was 18 years old, and 18-year-olds in the army don't argue with sergeants. So he wrapped the rifle, stowed it, and accepted the Springfield 1903A4 they issued him. The Springfield was a good rifle, accurate, reliable, proven in the last war and a dozen small ones since. The scope was military grade, the action was solid, but it wasn't his. The trigger had a slight creep before it broke. The stock didn't fit his shoulder quite right. The balance was different. Small things, things that wouldn't matter on a qualification range, things that could mean life or death at 800 yards against a German general who was also a sniper. Elias qualified expert with the Springfield, top scores in his class. Henriksen nodded approval but didn't smile. Sergeants don't smile at Camp Perry. The weeks passed. They learned to calculate range by eye, to read wind at distance, to account for temperature and humidity and the Coriolis effect on bullets traveling more than 1,000 yards. They learned to slow their heartbeats, to squeeze triggers instead of pulling them to become one with their weapons. And every night Elias lay in his bunk and thought about the Winchester in his footlocker, his mother's gift, his father's craftsmanship, his promise. One night, late after everyone else was asleep, Elias woke to the sound of someone moving in the barracks. He opened his eyes, saw a shape at the far end, moving toward the door. Sergeant Henriksen. Elias didn't move, didn't breathe, watched through barely open eyes as the sergeant slipped out into the night. Curious Elias waited 5 minutes, then followed, barefoot, silent, moving like he moved through Tennessee mountains like a ghost. The night range was deserted. Safety regulations said no one shoots after dark. But there in the moonlight, Sergeant Klaus Henriksen stood at the firing line with a rifle in his hands. Elias's Winchester. The sergeant raised it, aimed at the 300-yard target, fired, worked the bolt, fired again, 5 shots, smooth, professional. Then he lowered the rifle and spoke, even though he thought he was alone. Verdammt! This trigger is silk. He ran his hand along the stock, worked the action again. 2 pounds, 4 ounces. Perfect! And this balance. Better than any Springfield I've touched. He stood there for a long moment, holding the Winchester like it was something precious. Then he shook his head. Can't let him know. Can't show favoritism. Uniformity is survival. If every man brings his own weapon, we lose cohesion. We lose standardization. We lose men, he sighed. But damn, this is a beautiful rifle. Elias slipped back to the barracks. His mind was working. Henriksen knew. The sergeant understood that the Winchester was superior, but he couldn't admit it, couldn't make exceptions. The army ran on uniformity, on everyone using the same equipment, the same tactics, the same everything. But Elias also knew something else. He knew that in war survival sometimes means breaking rules, means trusting your own skills over someone else's doctrine. He made a decision. When they shipped out to Europe in August 1943, Elias Brennan carried 2 rifles. The Springfield officially issued, properly documented, inspected and approved. And the Winchester wrapped in canvas, hidden in his personal gear, a secret promise wrapped in walnut and steel. No one knew. Not the sergeants, not the officers, not even the other men in his unit. No one knew until August 1944 in France, when 2 expert sniper teams failed to kill a German general at 800 yards, and Elias Brennan unwrapped his mother's gift and proved that sometimes the weapon they mock is the weapon that saves 500 lives. But before that moment came, there would be war. There would be death. There would be a defensive line that cost 40 American boys their futures. And there would be a choice. follow orders or keep a promise. Elias Brennan chose the promise. The war in Europe was chaos. Beautiful French countryside torn by artillery, ancient villages reduced to rubble, fields that had grown wheat for 1,000 years now growing nothing but shell craters and corpses. By August 1944, the Allies had broken out of Normandy. The Germans were retreating, trying to establish new defensive lines, trying to buy time for their homeland, trying to survive. Elias's unit. The 2nd Infantry Division raced across France toward the port city of Brest. The advance was so fast that front lines became meaningless. American units found themselves surrounded by Germans who'd been bypassed. German units found themselves cut off from retreat. Chaos on both sides. Elias had become exactly what Camp Perry promised to make him. A sniper. Quiet. Patient. Deadly. He'd made 7 confirmed kills by August. 7 German soldiers who'd had families and dreams and futures until Elias Brennan looked at them through a scope and squeezed a trigger that broke at 2 pounds 4 ounces. He used the Springfield, kept the Winchester hidden, waiting. His best friend in the unit was a private named Finn O'Malley, Irish family, Ohio farm, 20 years old, with red hair and freckles and a laugh that could make you forget you were in hell. Finn was infantry, not a sniper, but he and Elias had bonded in basic training and stayed close. They sat in a foxhole one evening, sharing a canteen of water that tasted like metal and iodine tablets, watching the sun go down over a France that looked peaceful if you ignored the smoke on the horizon. "Ghost," Finn said. "That nickname again. When this is over, when we go home, you're teaching me those mountains of yours. Teaching me to shoot like you do." "First buck is yours," Elias promised. "Deal." Finn grinned. "I'll bring my ma's recipe for stew. Your pa can show me his shop. We'll be old men telling lies about this war before we know it." Elias smiled. Didn't say that most of them wouldn't make it to old age. Didn't say that war was killing them faster than bullets. That even the ones who survived would carry this inside them forever. Instead, he said, "Your ma's stew better be good. Best in Ohio." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun disappeared and the stars came out. Stars that looked the same here as they did in Tennessee. Same stars his father saw, his mother saw before she died. Same stars that would shine long after this war was dust. The next morning, everything changed. The division ran into a problem. A German defensive line had formed along a series of low ridges overlooking the main road to Brest. Artillery had been brought up. Infantry dug in. Machine gun nests positioned with excellent fields of fire. And someone was coordinating the defense with unusual skill. American attacks were being anticipated, flanking movements discovered and countered, every tactical adjustment predicted before it happened. Good men were dying and no one could figure out why. Intelligence got the answer 3 days later. Radio intercepts, aerial reconnaissance, German prisoners who talked under interrogation. General Major Friedrich Kruger. The ghost of the Eastern Front. A legend. He'd started the war as an enlisted sniper on the Russian front. 47 confirmed kills in the snow and rubble of Stalingrad. Then they'd promoted him for his tactical genius, his ability to read terrain and predict enemy movements. He'd held together retreating units that should have collapsed. Now he was doing it again in France, creating a defensive position that was costing American lives. Division command made the decision. Kruger had to die. The problem was access. The general never exposed himself near the front lines. He commanded from a position nearly a mile behind the German defensive works. Any American attempt to reach him would require crossing open ground under machine gun fire. Suicide, except for one option. A church, destroyed by artillery weeks ago, its bell tower still standing overlooking the German command position from 800 yards away. From that tower, a skilled marksman could potentially reach Kruger's location. Could. Potentially. 800 yards. Captain Silas Webb, the division's senior sniper officer, called his best teams together, explained the mission, explained the stakes. 40 American soldiers dead in 3 days. More dying every day. Kruger kept organizing that defense. 2 sniper teams volunteered immediately. The first team, Corporal Garrett Hayes and Private Arthur Welch, experienced men with multiple confirmed kills, went into the tower on August 15th. Elias watched them go, watched them crawl through the rubble under covering fire, watched them disappear into the broken church. Hours passed. Then finally, a shot. A single crack that echoed across the battlefield, and then immediately returned fire. German artillery opened up on the church. Shells screamed in. The tower shook. Stone dust billowed. Hayes and Welch came back bloody. Hayes had a bullet through his shoulder. A bullet fired from 800 yards away. Return fire. Impossible fire. But there it was, punched through Hayes's shoulder proof that General Major Kruger wasn't just a tactician. He was still a sniper. Welch was shaking. He shot back. Before we could even confirm our miss, he shot back 800 bloody yards, and he put a round through Hayes like he was standing next to him. The second attempt came 2 days later. Different team. Sergeant Malcolm Dunn and Corporal Nathaniel Caldwell called red for his hair. They tried a different approach. Infiltrated at night. Set up before dawn. Waited for first light. When Kruger appeared briefly at his command post, Dunn fired, and Kruger ducked. Before the bullet arrived. Before he could possibly have heard the shot. The return fire killed Caldwell instantly. Headshot. 800 yards. A moving target who'd only been visible for seconds. Dunn came back alone, traumatized, dragging Red's body. He knew. Somehow he knew. Saw the scope glint, felt the shot coming something. He's not human. You can't kill him. Not from that distance. Not when he's hunting you back. Elias stood in the aid station, looking at Red Caldwell's body under a canvas tarp. 22 years old. From Boston. Had a fiancée named Margaret. Dead because 800 yards was too far for the Springfield rifles to guarantee accuracy, and because the man they were hunting was himself a master sniper who knew every trick, every angle, every tell. Captain Webb was considering calling an airstrike, but airstrikes were imprecise, might kill their own men, might not kill Kruger at all. That night, Elias Brennan made his decision. He walked through the camp to Captain Webb's tent. The captain was alone, staring at casualty reports. 40 names. 40 boys who'd had mothers and fathers and futures. Elias stood at the tent entrance until Webb looked up. "Sir, I can make that shot." Webb's face was exhausted. 3 days of watching men die. 3 days of no solutions. "Private Brennan, I've lost 2 teams. Expert snipers. Good men. What makes you think you can succeed where they failed?" Elias took a breath. "They used the wrong rifles, sir." Webb frowned. "They used standard issue Springfields, same as you." "Sir, I have a different rifle, one I've been carrying since Camp Perry, one I know better than I know my own hands." He went back to his tent, returned with the canvas-wrapped Winchester, unwrapped it in front of Webb. The captain stared. "A hunting rifle? Have you lost your mind, Private? You want to attempt an 800-yard shot on a German general with a deer rifle?" "Yes, sir, it's the most accurate rifle I've ever fired. My father built it, my mother paid for it. I've put 10,000 rounds through it. I know every breath of wind it needs. I know how it shoots hot and cold. I know it better than those men knew their Springfields." Webb stood, walked around his desk, looked at the Winchester, back at Elias. "If you fail, you'll probably die in that tower. If I don't try, more men like Caldwell will die out there." Silence. Long silence. Webb, looking at casualty reports. 40 names. 40 futures ended. Finally he spoke. 48 hours, Private. You have 48 hours to make this shot. But I never saw that Winchester. I never approved the use of an unauthorized weapon. If anyone asks, you're using your issued Springfield. Understood?" "Yes, sir." They shook hands. Officer and enlisted. Captain and private. 2 men who understood that sometimes saving lives means breaking rules. "Don't make me regret believing in you, Ghost." Elias wrapped the Winchester. Went back to his tent. Finn was waiting. "You're going, aren't you?" "Yes." "Ghost, 2 teams failed. Red's dead. Hayes is crippled. That German is a monster." Elias looked at his friend. "He's not a monster, Finn. He's just a man. A skilled man. A dangerous man. But just a man. And men can be beaten. With your daddy's hunting rifle. With my mother's promise." Finn didn't understand, but he nodded anyway. That's what friends do. At 0300 hours on August 18th, 1944, Elias Brennan began his crawl toward the broken church and the 800-yard shot that would change everything. 3 o'clock in the morning, the darkest hour. The hour when men's spirits are lowest and death feels closest. The hour when Elias Brennan began the longest journey of his life. 200 yards. That's all the distance was from American lines to the church tower. 200 yards, that might as well have been 200 miles. No man's land. That's what they called the space between armies. A killing ground, every inch of it covered by German machine guns, every shadow potentially hiding a patrol, every sound potentially your last. Elias moved like water, like smoke, like the ghost they'd named him for. He'd left everything behind except what he needed, the Winchester. 60 rounds of ammunition hand-loaded by his father years ago, each cartridge identical to the last, a spotting scope, a canteen. the notebook filled with calculations he'd been making for 2 days, and in his breast pocket wrapped in oilcloth, a photograph of his father standing in the gunsmith shop holding a rifle smiling. He moved inches at a time, crawling on his belly through mud that smelled like cordite and death and rain. The Winchester cradled across his forearms, keeping it out of the dirt. His father's voice in his head. "Take care of the rifle and it'll take care of you. 10 yards in the first hour." The ground was cratered from artillery, shell holes filled with water that reflected the stars. Between the holes wire. Barbed wire coiled and tangled left over from earlier fighting. Elias navigated through it like threading a needle in the dark. One wrong move and the wire would sing. One sound and the machine guns would open up. 20 yards. A flare went up. German from their lines. It arced across the sky, trailing smoke, then burst into chemical brightness that turned night into day. Elias froze, face down in the mud, not breathing, not moving, not even blinking. The flare swung on its parachute, casting dancing shadows. Elias could hear German voices. Couldn't understand the words, but understood the tone. Bored, tired, men on watch who'd rather be sleeping. The flare died. Darkness returned like a blanket. Elias breathed again. 50 yards. A sound. Boots on broken stone. Close. Very close. Elias pressed himself into a shell crater, water soaking through his uniform, cold against his skin. He could see them now. German patrol. 3 men, moving along the edge of no man's land, checking for infiltrators. They passed within 5 feet of where he lay. He could have reached out and touched their boots, could smell their cigarettes, hear their breathing, hear one of them complain about the cold in German that Elias didn't need to understand to know what it meant. They moved on. Elias waited, counted to 100, then began crawling again. 100 yards. An artillery barrage. American from behind him. Shells screaming overhead, aimed at German positions a mile back. The noise was incredible. World-ending. The kind of sound that makes your bones vibrate and your ears ring and your mind wonder if this is what hell sounds like. A shell fell short, landed 30 yards from where Elias lay. The explosion lifted him off the ground, slammed him back down. Shrapnel hissed through the air. Something hit his helmet. A piece of metal the size of a coin, spinning red-hot. It punched through the steel, creased his helmet, left a groove you could put your finger in. Elias touched his head. No blood. The metal had spent its energy on the helmet. Another inch lower, and it would have killed him. He kept crawling. 150 yards. The church was visible now, a black shape against the slightly less black sky. The tower still standing, though its roof was gone. The walls looked solid from here, but Elias knew appearances were lies. Solid walls could hide weakness. Solid positions could become tombs. He thought about Hayes and Welch bleeding their way back from this tower 3 days ago. Thought about Red Caldwell carried back under canvas, a hole through his head from a bullet fired by a man who could read the battlefield like Elias's father read wood grain. 175 yards. Another patrol. Closer this time. 4 men. One of them carrying a dog. Elias's heart hammered. Dogs could smell what men couldn't see, could find what men couldn't hear. If that dog caught his scent, it was over. He lay perfectly still. The patrol was moving perpendicular to his position. The wind was blowing from his left, pushing his scent away from the dog. Luck. Pure luck. The kind of luck that keeps you alive when skill isn't enough. The dog stopped, sniffed the air. Elias could see it clearly now. A German shepherd. Beautiful animal, doing its job. The handler said something. The dog sniffed again, then moved on. Elias waited until they were gone. Until their voices faded. Until the night was silent again, except for the distant rumble of artillery and the closer sound of his own heartbeat. 200 yards. The church. Finally. After 4 hours of crawling through hell, he reached the tumbled stones at its base. 4 hours to cover 200 yards. But he was alive. The Winchester was clean. And somewhere above him in that tower was a position that overlooked a German general at 800 yards. He rested for 5 minutes. Let his heart slow. Let his breathing return to normal. Drank water from his canteen. Ate a piece of hard chocolate that tasted like wax, but gave him energy. Then he began to climb. The stairs were mostly gone, blown away by the same artillery that had destroyed the roof. But the stone walls had niches, handholds, places where a young man from the mountains, who'd spent his life climbing rocks and trees, could find purchase. He climbed in darkness, by feel. The Winchester slung across his back, the notebook and scope in his pack, his hands finding holds his eyes couldn't see. Halfway up, a stone shifted under his weight, started to fall. He caught it with his other hand, held it, didn't let it drop and clatter and announce his presence to every German within a mile. He set it down gently, kept climbing. The top, the bell chamber. The bells themselves were long gone, melted by fire or fallen to the rubble below, but the stone walls remained. Thick medieval walls that had stood for 500 years and would stand for 500 more. Through a narrow window, Elias could see the German lines, could see the command post 800 yards away, could see the road where Kruger's staff car would arrive in a few hours. He set up his position, the Winchester on a pile of rubble creating a stable platform, the spotting scope beside it, the notebook open to a page of calculations. Everything arranged precisely the way his father had taught him to arrange tools on a workbench, a place for everything and everything in its place. Then he waited. Dawn came slowly, grey light creeping across the French countryside. Elias watched the world wake up, watched German soldiers move through their morning routines, watched smoke from breakfast fires, watched officers gather at the command post, and he watched the wind. 3 distinct zones between his position and the target. His father had taught him this. Wind doesn't blow uniformly. It swirls, it eddies, it changes speed and direction based on terrain and temperature and 1,000 variables that most men never notice. The first zone nearest the church was calm, protected by the bulk of the tower itself, no wind to speak of. A bullet passing through this zone would fly true. The middle zone across open farmland was where the wind gusted. Elias watched the grass, saw it bend left in waves. Strong gusts, then calm, then strong again. A rolling wind, unpredictable, dangerous. A bullet passing through this zone would be pushed. The question was how much. The third zone near the German lines was different. The wind there was steady, blowing from right to left, consistent. A bullet passing through this zone would drift, but predictably. Elias made notes, drew diagrams, calculated wind speed by watching how fast the grass bent, how high it bent, how long it took to spring back. Mathematics learned at his father's bench. Physics learned through 10,000 rounds of practice. First zone, 0 adjustment. Middle zone. 4 clicks left on the scope to compensate for right-pushing gusts. Third zone. 6 clicks right to compensate for left-drifting steady wind. Net adjustment. 2 clicks right. He wrote it down, then checked it again and again. At 800 yards, a single click wrong meant a miss. A miss meant Red Caldwell died for nothing. The hours passed. The sun climbed higher. The temperature rose. Elias didn't move, didn't stand, didn't do anything that might be seen from below. At 8:30 in the morning, a staff car arrived at the German command post. Officers gathered. One of them wore a general's insignia. General Major Friedrich Kruger. Elias watched through his spotting scope. The German was in his 50s, grey hair, lean, moving with the economy of motion that comes from a lifetime of discipline. He walked to a map table, leaned over studied positions. Elias could take the shot now. Right now. Range was good. Wind was favourable. Target was stationary. But something stopped him. Patience. The same patience his father had taught him. The same patience that meant not taking the first deer you see, but waiting for the right deer. The perfect shot. Kruger straightened, scanned the horizon with binoculars. For a moment, those binoculars pointed directly at the church tower. Directly at where Elias lay hidden. Elias didn't move, didn't breathe. 2 snipers looking at each other across 800 yards. One of them didn't know the other was there. Not yet. Kruger lowered the binoculars, spoke to an aide, got back in his staff car, drove away. Elias breathed again, made notes. Time, 8:30. Duration, 3 minutes. Position map table north side. At 12:45, Kruger returned. Same pattern. Staff car, map table, binocular scan, departure. Elias made more notes. Duration. 2 minutes 40 seconds. At 16:20, a third appearance. Same routine. Elias began to see the pattern. Every 4 hours, same location, same actions. Kruger was a creature of habit, the way all good soldiers become creatures of habit. Routines save time. Routines create efficiency. Routines also get you killed. Elias calculated. The next appearance would be around 8:30 tomorrow morning, just after dawn. The light would be good. The wind patterns would be similar to today, and Kruger would stand in the same spot doing the same things because that's what worked. The sun set. The stars came out. Elias couldn't sleep, couldn't risk it. If he slept, he might miss something, might fail to notice a change in German procedures, might wake up to find them storming the tower. So he stayed awake. 16 hours, sitting in stone and rubble, watching, calculating, preparing, and thinking. Through his spotting scope in the fading evening light, he watched the German command post, watched Kruger appear one more time briefly, watched him reach into his coat pocket and pull out something small. A photograph. Elias adjusted his scope's focus. The image sharpened. He could see it clearly now. A woman. 2 boys. Young boys, maybe 8 and 5 years old. A family photo. The kind soldiers carry to remember why they're fighting, to remember what they're fighting for. Kruger looked at the photo for a long moment. His face softened. For just a second, he wasn't General Major Friedrich Kruger, the ghost of the Eastern Front, the tactical genius who'd killed 40 American boys in 3 days. He was just a father, looking at his sons, missing them, wondering if he'd ever see them again. Then he put the photo back in his pocket, over his heart, and the general's face returned. Hard, professional, ready for war. Elias felt something heavy settle in his chest. His hand moved to his own pocket, to the oilcloth-wrapped photograph of his father. He pulled it out, looked at it in the starlight. Callum Brennan, standing in his shop, holding a rifle, smiling because his son was taking the picture. 2 fathers, 2 men with families, 2 men who'd learned their trades from older men who'd learned from men older still, 2 men who understood rifles and wind and the mathematics of distance. Tomorrow one of them would die. And a woman somewhere would get a telegram, and 2 boys would grow up without a father. Elias knew it had to be Kruger. The German was killing Americans, had killed 40 already, would kill hundreds more if he wasn't stopped. The math was simple. 1 life to save 500. Easy calculation. But knowing something intellectually and feeling it emotionally are different things. He thought about his mother, Nora, who died bringing him into the world, who saved money she'd never see spent on a rifle she'd never see fired, who made a choice, a gift, a promise that had travelled through 16 years to arrive here in this tower in this moment. He thought about his father, teaching him wind reading, teaching him patience, teaching him that a rifle is a promise between you and the target. But his father had never said what happens when the target has his own promises, his own sons, his own photograph over his heart. War doesn't give you good choices, only necessary ones. Elias put the photograph back in his pocket, picked up his notebook, began the final calculations. 800 yards. In still air, a bullet from the Winchester would drop 106 inches, almost 9 feet. He'd need 12 clicks of elevation on his scope to compensate, but the air wasn't still. The wind would push the bullet. 4 clicks left for the middle zone, 6 clicks right for the final zone. Net effect, 2 clicks right. Temperature tomorrow would be around 68 degrees. Humidity around 73%. Minimal effect on bullet trajectory, but worth noting. The target would be standing, moving slightly, probably leaning over the map table. Elias would need to aim 18 inches above Kruger's head to account for bullet drop. The bullet would arc up peak at 400 yards, then fall. At 800 yards, it would arrive exactly where he aimed it. If his calculations were right, if the wind didn't change, if Kruger stood in the same spot. A lot of ifs. Elias checked his calculations again, then a 4th time. Mathematics don't lie. Physics don't lie. The bullet would go where the math said it would go, unless he missed something, unless the wind shifted, unless Kruger's 6th sense told him to duck at the wrong moment. He thought about Red Caldwell, about how Kruger had known, had ducked before the bullet arrived, had felt it coming the way animals feel earthquakes before they happen. Could you dodge a bullet you couldn't see? Could you sense death at 800 yards? Maybe, if you were good enough, if you'd made 47 kills on the Eastern Front, if you were the ghost of the Eastern Front, hunting another ghost. Elias closed the notebook. There was nothing more to calculate. He'd done the math. He'd read the wind. He'd studied the target. Now there was only waiting. He thought about Finn. Back in the American lines, probably worried, probably wondering if Ghost was dead yet, probably planning what to say at the memorial service. Don't worry, Finn Elias thought. I'll see those Ohio farms. I'll teach you the mountains. We'll be old men telling lies about this war. I promise, if he could keep one more promise. The flashbacks came unbidden. Memory does that when you're exhausted, when you've been awake for too long and death is too close. He was 12 again. In his father's shop, Callum was teaching him to read grass. Watch the wind, boy. See how it moves? That's your teacher. Wind doesn't lie. He was 14, at the county shooting competition. Adults were laughing. This boy thinks he can outshoot us. Then he'd fired. 5 rounds. 5 bullseyes. The laughter stopped. He was 16, on the mountain with his father. The Winchester new in his hands. His mother's choice. His father's work. His promise to keep. Take care of it and it'll take care of you. He was 18. At Camp Perry, Sergeant Henriksen holding the Winchester high. This is a toy, gentlemen. A pretty toy for a spoiled boy. He was now, 20 years old. In a broken tower, in a broken church, in a broken country. 800 yards from a man who had to die so other men could live. The night was silent. No artillery. No gunfire. Just the wind in the grass and the stars overhead, and a young man with a rifle his mother bought before she died. Elias checked the Winchester one final time. Worked the action. Smooth as water. Felt the trigger. 2 pounds 4 ounces. Perfect. Sighted through the scope. The crosshairs were clean. True. Waiting. He positioned himself. Found the most comfortable shooting position he could manage on the pile of rubble. Arranged the Winchester so that when the moment came, all he'd need to do was breathe, aim, and fire. Then he waited for dawn. The sky in the east began to lighten. Grey, then pink, then gold. The stars faded. The world woke up. 7 o'clock. German soldiers moving through their routines. Breakfast fires. Morning inspections. The business of war. 7:30. Officers gathering at the command post, setting up for the day. Preparing maps and reports and all the paperwork that armies require. 7:45. A staff car on the road, moving toward the command post. Elias's heart began to beat faster. He controlled it, slowed his breathing, in through the nose, out through the mouth, calm, steady, ready. The staff car arrived, doors opened, officers stepped out, and there in the morning light, grey hair catching the sun, was General Major Friedrich Kruger, the ghost of the Eastern Front, walking toward his death. Elias settled behind the Winchester, found his breathing rhythm, placed the crosshairs on the map table where Kruger would stand. Checked the wind one last time. Still blowing the same patterns. First zone calm, middle zone gusting left, final zone steady right. 2 clicks right on the windage, 12 clicks up for elevation. Crosshairs 18 inches above where Kruger's head would be. Kruger walked to the map table, leaned over it, studying something. An aide pointed at something on the map. Kruger nodded. In Elias's mind, his father's voice. Breathe, squeeze, surprise. Don't pull the trigger, let it break, like glass, clean and sharp and sudden. Elias's finger touched the trigger. 2 pounds 4 ounces of pressure between now and forever, for his father who taught him, for his mother who chose this rifle, for Red Caldwell who died trying, for the 40 men who fell, for the 500 who would live if this shot was true, and for Friedrich Kruger who deserved a warrior's death, who deserved to know he'd been beaten by someone who respected him, who deserved in some small way to be forgiven for being a soldier doing his duty. The crosshairs steadied. The wind held. The moment arrived. Elias squeezed the trigger. The Winchester cracked. And 800 yards away, a bullet began the 1-second journey that would change everything. The bullet left the barrel at 2,800 feet per second. Faster than sound. Faster than thought. A spinning cylinder of copper and lead precisely 306 inches in diameter weighing 150 grains. But numbers don't tell the story. Mathematics can describe the physics, but they can't describe the moment. They can't describe what it feels like to send a piece of metal across 800 yards of French air toward a man's heart. Elias watched through the scope. The recoil had pushed the Winchester back against his shoulder, but he held steady. Didn't flinch. Didn't look away. If you take the shot, you watch what happens. That was another of his father's lessons. You don't turn away from what you've done. The bullet was invisible. Too fast to see, too small to track. But Elias could imagine its path. Had calculated it so many times that he could see it in his mind as clearly as if he were flying alongside it. Time became strange, elastic. 1 second in reality became an eternity in memory. 0.0 seconds. The bullet exits the barrel, still rising on its trajectory. Through the scope, Elias can see Kruger clearly. The general is leaning over the map table, his finger tracing a line, a road perhaps, or a defensive position. He's saying something to an aide. The aide is nodding. Just another morning at a command post. Just another day of war. 0.15 seconds. The bullet has crossed 300 yards. Still rising. Still climbing toward the peak of its arc. The physics are beautiful. The rifling in the barrel has imparted spin. 270,000 revolutions per minute. This spin keeps it stable, keeps it flying true. Kruger straightens slightly, still looking at the map, still talking. Whatever he's saying, it's important enough that his attention is focused downward instead of outward. A mistake. A small one. But at 800 yards, small mistakes are fatal. 0.35 seconds. The bullet reaches 400 yards. This is the peak of its arc. For one infinitesimal moment, the bullet hangs in space, neither rising nor falling. Physics in perfect balance. Then gravity wins, and the bullet begins its descent. Kruger's hand moves to his coat pocket, the pocket over his heart, the pocket where he keeps the photograph of his wife and sons. For just a moment, his fingers touch it, a gesture of memory, a reminder of why he's here. Elias sees this through the scope, sees the general's hand on the pocket, knows what's there, knows that in half a second that photograph will be soaked with blood. His chest tightens. Not regret, not hesitation, just acknowledgement. This is what war is. Not glory, not honor, just men killing other men so that other men might live. 0.6 seconds. The bullet is at 600 yards. Falling now, arcing down toward Earth, and here the wind catches it. The middle zone. The gusting, rolling wind that Elias spent hours studying. The wind pushes the bullet 4 inches to the right. But Elias calculated for this, adjusted for this. 4 clicks left on his scope. The wind pushes right. The 2 forces cancel. The bullet continues on its path. Kruger takes his hand from his pocket, returns to the map, leans over again. His aide points at something. They're discussing tactics, planning how to hold this line one more day. 0.8 seconds. 700 yards. The bullet enters the 3rd wind zone, the steady wind blowing from right to left. This wind pushes the bullet 3 inches back to the left. Again, Elias had calculated. 6 clicks right on his scope. The wind pushes left. Net effect 3 inches right of center, exactly where he wanted it. Kruger's mouth opens. He's saying something, giving an order. The aide snaps to attention, begins to turn, about to carry out whatever command the general just gave. The aide will never complete that turn, will never deliver that order. 1 full second. 800 yards. The bullet arrives. It strikes General Major Friedrich Kruger precisely 1 inch below his left ear. The angle is perfect. The placement is perfect. The bullet enters through soft tissue, travels through the brainstem, severs the connection between brain and body in an instant. Kruger doesn't hear the shot. Sound travels at 1,100 feet per second. The bullet was traveling at 2,800. It arrived before its own sound. There is no pain, no awareness. One moment Kruger is giving orders, planning tactics, winning this small piece of the war. The next moment he is gone. Between those moments there is nothing. No time to think or fear or regret. Just the instant transition from being to not being. His body collapses, falls across the map table, the map of defensive positions he was studying. The map that will never be used now. The aide freezes. Doesn't understand what's happening. Sees the general fall and thinks maybe it's a heart attack, maybe exhaustion. It takes him 2 full seconds to see the blood, to understand. Then he screams. 800 yards away in a broken bell tower, Elias Brennan works the bolt on his Winchester. Muscle memory. Training. The bolt slides back, ejecting the spent cartridge. Slides forward, chambering a fresh round. He settles the crosshairs on the command post again, waiting to see if he needs a second shot. He doesn't. Through the scope, he can see the chaos. Officers scattering, taking cover, shouting. One of them is trying to drag Kruger's body to safety. But there's no point. You don't survive a bullet through the brainstem. Elias lowers the rifle. His hands are shaking now, not from fear, from the adrenaline leaving his system, from the reality of what he's just done settling into his bones. He whispers 3 words, in German. Words he learned from prisoners, words he needed to say even though no one would hear them. Ruhe in Frieden. Rest in peace. A single tear runs down his face. He doesn't wipe it away. There's no shame in tears. Not for this. Not for taking a father from his sons. Even if it had to be done. Even if it was necessary. War is full of necessary evils. That doesn't make them less evil, just necessary. He takes one more look through the spotting scope. The Germans still haven't located where the shot came from. They're looking in the wrong direction, expecting the threat from ground level, not thinking about the ruined church tower that 2 sniper teams already failed from. Good. That gives him time. Elias gathers his equipment. The Winchester, the scope, the notebook, the spent cartridge casing. Every piece packed carefully, methodically, the way you do things when your life depends on doing them right. Then he begins his descent from the tower. The escape was harder than the approach. Now it was daylight. Now the Germans were alert. Now they knew a sniper was active. Elias found a shell crater 20 yards from the church, slid into it. The crater was half full of water that smelled like rust and death. He submerged everything except his head. Waited. The Germans were organizing. He could hear them shouting, hear vehicles moving. They were going to search, going to find whoever killed their general. An artillery shell screamed in, landed on the church. The tower, the beautiful medieval tower that had stood for 500 years, collapsed, stone and mortar and dust billowing into the air. The Germans were destroying the sniper position. 18 minutes too late. Elias watched his firing position die. Then he began to move again. He found a drainage ditch, filled with water, but it was cover. He moved through it like a snake, arms pulling, legs kicking. The Winchester held above water. Always above water. His shoulder hit something soft in the murk. A body. German. Dead for days. Bloating. He pushed past it. Didn't look. Couldn't afford to think about how he'd just added another body to this war's collection. Keep moving. Just keep moving. 100 yards. 50. He heard English. American voices. Nearly there. He climbed out of the ditch. Stood. Staggered forward. His legs barely worked after 20 hours of crawling and climbing and waiting. Contact! Contact! Front! An American soldier had seen him, was raising his rifle. Friendly! Elias croaked. Friendly Brennan sniper team! The rifle lowered. Hands grabbed him, pulled him into the foxhole, and there waiting was Finn O'Malley, red hair and freckles, and a smile that split his face like sunrise. Ghost! Christ! Ghost! We thought you were dead! Elias tried to speak. Couldn't. His legs gave out. He collapsed. Finn caught him, held him up. Did you make the shot? Elias nodded once. Finn laughed. Not because it was funny. Because relief makes people laugh sometimes. Because his friend was alive and the impossible mission worked. You crazy Tennessee bastard. You actually did it. Elias closed his eyes. Let Finn hold him up. Let the exhaustion take him. He was done. The shot was made. The promise was kept. He slept for 16 hours. He woke in a field hospital. Canvas tent. Smell of disinfectant and blood and coffee. His shoulder was bandaged where shrapnel had grazed him. He didn't remember getting treated. Captain Silas Webb was sitting beside his cot. The officer looked like he hadn't slept either. Private Brennan, welcome back. Elias sat up. His head swam. Sir, the shot. Confirmed. German radio traffic went wild yesterday morning. Kruger is dead. Their defensive line collapsed within 24 hours. Without his coordination, the subordinate commanders couldn't hold. We broke through in 3 places simultaneously. Webb pulled out a piece of paper. Casualty estimates. Intelligence estimates your shot saved 500 American lives. Probably more. Kruger would have held that line for another week. A lot of boys would have died. 500 lives. The number was too big to process. What meant something was Red Caldwell's face. The 40 names on Webb's casualty reports. The photograph in Kruger's pocket. How do you feel? Webb asked. Tired, sir. And old. Older than 20. Webb nodded. That's war, son. It ages you in ways that don't show on a calendar. Finn appeared at the tent entrance. Saw Elias awake. Grinned and came over. The hero returns. They're talking about Medal's ghost. Silver Star, maybe. Elias shook his head. I'm not a hero, Finn. You killed a general at 800 yards, saved 500 men. Heroes don't feel like this. The grin faded. Finn sat on the edge of the cot. Like what? Elias pulled out his notebook. Opened it to the last page. The sketch he'd drawn while waiting. General Major Friedrich Kruger. And beside him, the photograph from his pocket. A woman. 2 boys. Finn looked at the sketch. Then at Elias. You saw his family. Through the scope. He pulled out their picture, looked at it, put it over his heart. Then I shot him through the brain. Long silence. The kind that exists between friends who understand some things don't have easy answers. Finally, Finn spoke. You saw him as a man, not just a target. That makes you human ghost. Doing what had to be done doesn't make you a monster. It makes you a soldier. I killed someone's father to save other fathers. War doesn't give us good choices, just necessary ones. Elias closed the notebook. Knew Finn was right, but also knew that rightness doesn't make the weight easier to carry. Captain Webb stood. Rest, Private. When you're ready, come find me. There's something you need to see. 3 days later, Elias reported to division headquarters. His shoulder was healing, his body was rested. His mind still saw Kruger falling. Webb met him at the entrance. Someone flew in from Camp Perry to see you. Elias's stomach tightened. Camp Perry. That meant Sergeant Henriksen. They walked into the headquarters tent, and there he was, the instructor who called his rifle a toy, who humiliated him in front of 60 men. Elias snapped to attention. Sergeant? Henriksen looked at him. Looked at the Winchester Elias was carrying, picked it up, worked the action, felt the trigger, looked down the barrel. Then he spoke. Private Brennan, I owe you an apology. Elias blinked. Sir, I called this rifle a toy, called it civilian garbage, said it didn't belong in war. Henriksen held the Winchester with both hands, respectfully. I was wrong. He handed it back. The rifle wasn't wrong. My understanding was. I thought uniformity mattered more than familiarity. I thought standard equipment trumped personal skill. I thought the Army's way was the only way. He looked Elias in the eye. You proved me wrong. 800 yards with a hunting rifle. A shot 2 expert teams missed with military weapons. You did it because this rifle is part of you. Because you know every quirk, every tendency, every breath of wind it needs. You've taught me something important, Private. He extended his hand. Thank you. They shook. Instructor and student, 2 men who understood rifles and what they represent. Captain Webb cleared his throat. There's more, Sergeant. Official business. He picked up a folder, opened it. Private Brennan, by order of Division Command, you are hereby awarded the Silver Star with Valor for extraordinary heroism in action. Your actions on August 19, 1944, resulted in the preservation of American lives and the successful completion of tactical objectives. He pulled out another paper. Furthermore, by special exception, you are authorized to continue using the Winchester Model 70 serial number 7342 as your primary sniper weapon for the duration of hostilities. This weapon is now officially United States Army equipment assigned to Private Elias Brennan. Webb looked up, smiled slightly. Your toy is now official Army equipment, Ghost. Elias looked at the Winchester, at the walnut stock his father shaped, at the bluing his father applied, at the rifle his mother paid for before she died. It was never a toy, sir. It's what my mother chose, what my father built, what saved 500 lives. The best kind of weapon, Henriksen said. The kind that carries meaning. Elias Brennan served the rest of the war, made 17 more confirmed kills before Germany surrendered. 23 total, each one necessary, each one carried, each one remembered. But the 800-yard shot became legend. Word spread through the Army, through sniper units, through training programs. The civilian rifle that instructors mocked had proven that familiarity matters more than specifications, that a shooter who knows his weapon can outperform technically superior equipment. Military sniper doctrine began to change. Customization was encouraged. Personal fit mattered. The bond between shooter and rifle was recognized as critical, all because a Tennessee boy kept a promise his mother made before she died. When the war ended, Elias went home, back to Tennessee, back to the Blue Ridge Mountains, back to his father's shop. Callum was older now, greyer, slower. But when Elias walked through the door with the Winchester, his father's face said everything words couldn't. You kept it. I promised. They embraced, father and son. 2 men who understood that rifles are more than tools, that promises matter, that some gifts echo across years and miles and wars. Elias took over the shop when Callum's hands grew too old for fine work. He built rifles, repaired weapons, taught young men to shoot the way his father taught him, watch the grass, feel the wind, understand that mastery takes 10,000 rounds of practice. The Winchester hung above the workbench, oiled, maintained. Never fired again except to check the zero once a year. It wasn't a hunting rifle anymore. It was a kept promise. A mother's gift. A father's craft. 500 lives saved, 1 life taken, all wrapped in walnut and steel and memory. Finn O'Malley visited twice a year, came down from Ohio with his wife and children. Elias taught Finn's boys to shoot, took them into the mountains, kept that promise too, the promise of teaching the mountains to a friend who survived when so many didn't. They'd sit on the porch of the gunsmith shop, 2 old soldiers watching the sun go down over the ridges, and they'd tell stories. Not war stories, not about the killing, just stories about the boys they knew, the ones who didn't come home. Red Caldwell and his fiancée Margaret, the 40 names on Captain Webb's casualty reports. "We lived for them," Finn would say. "We live with them," Elias would correct. Young veterans came to the shop sometimes, men who'd heard the story. Who wanted to see the rifle that killed a general at 800 yards? Elias showed them, explained the mathematics, the wind reading, the calculations. But he never told them about Kruger's photograph, about the sketch in his notebook that he kept in a locked drawer. Some weights you carry alone, some memories are yours to bear. In 1994, on a November morning when the mountains were painted with frost, Elias Brennan died in his sleep. 70 years old, a good life, a full life, a life that proved you can carry darkness and still find light. His will specified that the Winchester go to the National Infantry Museum, not to family, not to collectors, to a place where people could learn from it. The museum accepted it gratefully, created a special display, the rifle in a climate-controlled case. Beside it, the silver star, the notebook with its wind calculations and the sketch Elias never showed anyone. Photographs of a young man in uniform holding a rifle the army called a toy. The placard reads, Winchester Model 70, serial number 73-42, used by Sergeant Elias Brennan to make an 800-yard shot, August 1944, France. This civilian hunting rifle, initially rejected by military instructors as inappropriate for combat, saved an estimated 500 American lives and changed military sniper doctrine. Sergeant Brennan's actions proved that familiarity with the weapon matters more than specifications. His mother bought this rifle before she died. His father built it with his own hands. He kept it as a promise. He used it to save lives. The rifle waits there still, silent, patient, a testament to promises kept, to mothers who save for gifts they'll never see given, to fathers who teach their sons that mastery takes time, to young men who refuse to let others define what's possible, to the truth that sometimes the weapon they mock is the weapon that wins, and that 800 yards, 1 second, 1 bullet can change everything.